been bought and paid for. So it's no surprise, that we're in this cycle now of kind of accelerating concentrations of wealth and accelerating crises, really, in every facet of our lives. Add to that, you have ballot access restrictions. So at a time when the American people are screaming for more choices and not having these two zombie candidates, forced down our throats, which people are just tearing their hair out about, you have these limitations that prevent people-powered political challenge from getting on the ballot and providing voters with more options, which is what voters are demanding in record high numbers. So there are all these categories right now that basically shut people out and let big money and corporations rule the day. Democrats and Republicans are funded systematically by this money. And, that's why we are fighting now really hard to get on the ballot in New York. New York State has the most difficult ballot access rules of any state. And we're in the process right now of collecting some 90,000 signatures. We have 2 weeks to go to finish this. This is kind of Empire's last stand, where they are pulling out all the stops to keep a people-powered anti-genocide, anti-war campaign off the ballot. And we are the only such campaign that's currently on track to challenge the empire. And to do that, you have to be on the ballot really across the country. Otherwise, the media won't cover you. They will use that as an excuse to just say that you're a fringe candidate, even though we reflect, the majority of the American people's deeply held values, not only against genocide, endless war, the collapse of the climate, this crushing inequality that has just become the name of the game here in our economy. So these are, just moving from springboarding from your question about the Supreme Court and how it is really an obstruction to democracy. That, unfortunately, is just a sign of our times and makes it all the more critical that we stand up right now in this perfect storm and, fight the hardest battle that we can fight. And I should probably say right now, before we go too far into this, that this is a potentially winnable election. We are in this absolutely transformative moment right now where, where we have this horrific genocide, which is a red line for so many people. People have had it with the two political parties that have been throwing them under the bus. And there will be 3 pro-war, pro-genocide candidates on the ballot. They could potentially all be splitting the pro-war vote. Our campaign will be the only anti-war, anti-genocide, pro-worker, and pro-climate emergency campaign on the ballot. So it'll be a 4-way race. And if you have 3 of them splitting the pro-war vote, we could be in a situation where we potentially prevail even in this election. When you have a 4-way split in a race, that race can be won with as little as 26% of the vote. Now, that's not to say that's necessarily how it will turn out, but that is to say that anybody who tells you that this is a hopeless case, or that we can't win, or that we're powerless and we should just go crawl back into a hole again, this is to basically stand up and say, screw them, don't listen to them. These are basically mouthpieces for empire and oligarchy, which has thrown us all under the bus. So this is time for us to take inspiration from the students on the campuses who are standing up and demanding an America that works for all of us and a world that works for all of us. This is actually concretely within our reach in this election. And if we don't win the White House, but we win the day by consolidating a political force that will be here for the long haul, that's going to fight this battle until we win it, because our lives depend on it, let alone our children's lives, but our lives too. We could see this blow up in our faces a million different ways within the next decade. So we really urge people to stand up and fight like our lives depend on it for the democracy that we deserve and that we were promised, this is the time to stand up and fight, because in fact our lives very much do depend on reviving that democracy and an agenda that's working for us.
So can I actually ask?
Do you have any polling? Sorry, do you have any polling showing that the war is the primary motivator behind, like, what percentage of Americans are considering that their do or die? Because on TikTok it seems like a lot, but I don't know if there's any data showing that nationwide that's accurate.
Well, let me say, there is quite a bit of polling to show that it is a strong majority of Americans who want to shut down this genocide and who regard this genocide as horrific and who are demanding an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic solution. That is a strong majority. And depending on your poll, it can be anywhere from 55% up to 68%. But what we know is that it is a majority and it is growing. In terms of what compels people's votes, it's usually it's like a general rule, politics 101, that people respond to what is most immediate in their lives. And usually foreign policy is not the driver. However, we are in an unusual time right now. It's like during the war in Vietnam, which was really where I, became an activist. We were fighting, our generation was fighting for our lives. So we were very much in the target hairs of that war because of the draft. Well, what's going on now? We don't have a draft, so to speak, specifically, but we have something kind of comparable to a draft because the lives of young people are really on the line. If you do polls among young people, half of people under 30 describe themselves as hopeless about the future, and 1/4 of young people have contemplated harming themselves within the last 2 weeks before the poll because they are that, distraught about the state of our world and how an entire generation has been locked out of that world because of student debt, because of the lack of good jobs, because the rent is too damn high, because people cannot afford to, widely to have kids, to bring up a family, to have a home of their own. It's like people have had this hopelessness really inflicted on them because the younger generation is the latest cash cow for all sorts of, really for a predatory economy. So all of the economic issues here line up with the foreign policy issues. Those who oppose genocide most tend to be young people whose lives are being most destroyed by this war economy. This is an economy that is dedicated, number one, front and center, to the endless war machine, which consumes half of our congressional budget. And a huge amount of our tax dollars are spent, above all, to conduct endless war, these catastrophic and genocidal wars around the world. So, that is, the flip side of that endless war is that we don't have the money here at home to spend on what we need for housing, to wipe out student debt. Student debt should be abolished. We abolished the debt for the Wall Street, crooks who crashed the economy. We bailed them out. We should be bailing out a generation of young people who basically been doing what they were advised to do, taking out loans, getting an education, but then lo and behold, in an odd way, it's not exactly a draft, but it is the consequence of our foreign policy. So I feel very optimistic about what's driving votes right now. And, you hear people who are just distraught at these two, widely disliked candidates, reviled candidates. People aren't voting for them, they're voting against the one that they hate the most. That's not what democracy looks like. Democracy needs an explicit vision and an agenda and, and a shared effort to make that agenda happen. So, that is why, we can stand up and we can think of this election as a potentially winnable election, and to look at young people, they are leading the charge right now. And if we get the word out, and the media is trying to suppress the word that there is a choice, but when young people know that there is a way to abolish debt, to institute rent control around the country, to establish a tenant bill of rights, to provide health care as a human right for everyone, to ensure that we have action to sustain the climate, that we can declare a climate emergency, and, ensure that there is a climate future. We were ahead of the curve when we called for free public higher education. So I'd say what's different is that the times have caught up to us, and the times, people have sort of grown with the times, and the demand has grown. I think what's also really different is that people are not trapped in this kind of abusive relationship with the Democratic Party that they used to be. People used to make apologies for the Democratic Party all the time, and and to say, oh, I don't have a choice, and it'll get better next year. It's like all the excuses that an abused partner makes for their abuser, people have been making for a long time for the Democratic Party, and and for the Republicans in their own way. But the Republicans don't really make promises. It's the Democrats who make promises, so people get very rightfully pissed off at them, and people who expect that we have some kind of a community here, and some kind of a shared vision and responsibility for our world. We're not just, each man to himself as an island. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to lead our lives and to have productive and fulfilling lives. And so, that's just, the way that we can do this and insist. What is different is mainly that the curve has caught up to us, and there are a whole lot more people who are ready to stand up and demand that, that we have a government that's working for us, not for corporations, and that we pull back from the brink on climate, on crushing inequality, and especially on endless war and genocide. And I have to say that the genocide and what's going on in Gaza, and especially what's going on in Rafah, with the last little trickle of food and water having been shut off now a week ago, there are 20 U.S. healthcare providers who are in Gaza now who can't get out, like the people of Gaza can't get out, and nobody has food or water. And these 20 healthcare providers are supposed to be in very serious condition right now. It's just, to me, it's just unthinkable every time I allow my mind to go there about what's going on in Gaza. And it just makes me want to do everything that I can to shut that down. And I would just encourage people to get out there with petitions, in whatever state you're in New York especially, but we have ballot access campaigns going on still in many states. They're not as difficult as New York. New York is the big obstruction, but there are ballot access drives going on everywhere. And if you are in a state where that ballot drive is going on, I encourage you, to challenge empire and to, really put opposition to genocide on this ballot in this election. And if we get on in New York, which we hope to do in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be a shot across the bow of Joe Biden, and it will be more pressure for him to back off and to stop. Will he do it? I don't know. I wouldn't hold my breath. But we need to do everything in our power that we possibly can.
Now, you currently have a petition going right now for New York, correct? To get on the ballot?
That's right, yes.
Yes.
So
Okay.
I'm in New York,
Exactly.
and
So sign it. If you're from New York, you need to get on there, get to helping getting her on the ballot. So make
so
sure
if
and
you
spread
live
that
in New
news.
York, because I live in New York, what are the steps to helping you and your campaign?
Awesome. Thank you. So your first step is actually to go to our website, JillStein2024.com. And actually, let's see, because what we really want you to do first is to register as someone who's carrying the petition. The petition is pretty straightforward. There's a training video up on our website, again, at jillstein2024.com. And you can get plugged in. And
Just go to the website.
Yes, if you just go to our website and volunteer as a petitioner for New York, we will contact you right away, and we'll make sure that you have support. You know how to do this. We will also, once you have registered as a petitioner, that way we won't lose track of your petitions, because the last thing you want to do is collect 100 or 500 signatures and then not know what to do with them. So we will come and pick them up. We will get them from you. We will make sure that they get turned in the time frame that they need. And we'll be there to ask any questions, to provide you support, to tell you where the gang is going on any one day. You know, they're great events where collecting signatures is like, fish in a barrel. You go to a, any kind of an environmental event, or you go to an anti-war event or an anti-genocide event. It's going to be really easy to just line up those signatures, one right after the other.
Okay.
While we're speaking about those events, can we talk about the current uptake that we've seen in police brutality across our nation, and how you might deal with the militarization of our police force?
Yeah, so let me say first that a militarized police is kind of the flip side of a militarized foreign policy. And while we are conducting a genocide, while we are conducting, this is like absolutely staggering, but according to Brown University's Cost of War project, we have so-called anti-terror special operations going on right now in 85 countries around the world. We have a completely militarized foreign policy, which is just a mess. It's a mess. It's one catastrophe after another, from Iraq, the weapons of mass destruction that did not exist, that killed 1 million people in Iraq, that killed some, 500,000 or 1 million, I forget, children even before the war. It's just outrageous what is being committed in our name. But all of these wars, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, it is just one disaster after another. And, the flip side of this militarized mindset, this militarized approach to security and to international relations, it's been a disaster. War after war that basically creates, failed states, to look at Iraq or to look at Libya, for example, or Afghanistan. That's all we do. We create failed states, mass refugee migrations, and ongoing terrorist threats. So these wars have been an absolutely unmitigated disaster. They're also impoverishing us, costing us half of our congressional budget. It's been some $21 trillion since the first 9/11 war. So these are a disaster in every way imaginable. And they also put us all at risk, because every time we're involved in a war, in this age of proliferating nuclear weapons, and we have taken the lead in dismantling the nuclear arms treaties as well, we as the U.S., it's absolutely shameful, and now we're in a very precarious state of nuclear weapons right now. And one nuclear-armed submarine, this is a little-known fact because the mainstream world does not want to talk about this. One nuclear-armed submarine carries the equivalent of 5,000 Hiroshima bombs. And I think we've all seen, pictures of what that looks like, and hundreds of thousands of people wiped out in the blink of an eye. Well, this is 5,000 of that, which is not only a disaster where it happens, this is also a global disaster because, it doesn't take a lot of nuclear weapons, and Hiroshima-sized weapons are now considered tactical. These are not the big guns. These are kind of the minimalist weapons. It only takes, a fairly modest exchange of those weapons to kick us into what's called nuclear winter, which is where so much debris is kicked up into the upper atmosphere. all this debris from the nuclear explosions, when you see those mushroom clouds are all about debris getting kicked up into the other upper atmosphere where it doesn't weather down. It's above the weather. So it's there for years and potentially decades, long enough to starve us all, basically by global famine. So nuclear war is actually a threat to everyone. Nuclear weapons should be abolished right now, but our criminal misleaders are basically tools of the weapons profiteers, so they're not going to talk about this. They don't even know about it. I mean, they are absolutely clueless. So, you know, these are the trappings of a militarized foreign policy, which has been a disaster. And the flip side of that is the militarized police. And a point to that effect is that who
I don't know what happened.
So
I think her internet connection's wonky.
We never know.
imagine
I
hearing
think a
me?
couple of people are asked. Go ahead.
There you go.
All right, okay, there we go. I was frozen here for a minute because my phone wants some more juice. All right, so I will just hold this here. Yeah.
Did anybody ask her about sanctioning Israel yet?
I was about to, but you can ask her that question. Yeah, I was just going to kind of go on a whole Israel thing.
I want to know if she's going to make Israel sign a nuclear treaty. I want to know if she's going to
Let me just assume that you're hearing me.
We hear you.
And, you know, that has a lot to do with how, you know, this rise in police brutality, they are being taught, you know, the strategies that have been inflicted on the Palestinian people. They're also being armed with military weapons through this program called the 1033 program that allows the military to basically pass on its surplus equipment, whether it's tanks or armored vehicles or drones, armed drones. You know, I mean, what in the world is this kind of equipment doing in our communities? So, you know, again, it is a sign of the empire that we very much need to dismantle, because it does come back to bite us, both in the assault on our democracy and the very dangerous militarization of our police.
Wally had a question.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to meet with us all. I'm Palestinian American, and I have family in the West Bank, and they have been brutally attacked continuously by Yitzhar. It's a settlement in the West Bank that's very violent. I've been working with the State Department already and submitted a large portfolio with some attorneys for settler sanctions, but I feel like that's the most I can do yet. It doesn't seem that it will have much effect whether or not those sanctions are placed on those settlers. What is your policy regarding settlements? We've seen politicians like President Biden, I believe he reversed the stance to make it illegal again, but there's no actual action done to stop the expansion. What are your views on that? And then with that same question, sanctions towards Israel in general, what are your thoughts on that, and if that relates? Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think these two things go together. You know, and again, Joe Biden needs to stop the ethnic cleansing and the somewhat slower genocide taking place on the West Bank. But this is also absolutely unacceptable and has to be stopped. The settlements all need to be reversed, to say the least, and they're just not okay. They have to stop going forward, but they also have to be corrected for the damage that they have done. And I think, you know, again, we need a president who acts like a president, not like a war secretary for Bibi Netanyahu. This is absolutely a betrayal of the responsibility of the president, who has essentially allowed Bibi Netanyahu to define foreign policy for the United States of America. If Israel wants to attack Iran and drag the U.S. into a war with Iran, Biden, you know, basically has no objections and has essentially given Bibi Netanyahu a green light to do whatever he wants. You know, it's outrageous that Ronald Reagan, a very, you know, conservative and reactionary president, was capable of reining in some of the worst abuses of Israel back in the 1980s when Reagan told Israel to withdraw their occupying troops from Lebanon and to stop their missile strikes. And that happened immediately. Dwight Eisenhower did the same thing in the 1950s to the Israeli invasion, along with along with France and Britain to basically invade Egypt. And that also was called to an immediate halt. The U.S. is in charge here, and Bibi Netanyahu has effectively become the commander-in-chief for the U.S. So this is a complete betrayal of the responsibilities of the president. And again, it reflects that the people in power, need to be removed from power as quickly as humanly possible. They are not up to the task. They are incompetent, incapable, and on the wrong side of history and the wrong side of justice here. And in our campaign, on day one, the flow of weapons, the protection, the diplomatic cover, the intelligence, all the ways that the U.S. makes this genocide possible, they come to a screeching halt, which is why simply getting on the ballot is a heads up, both to Israel, that there is a strong force here in the United States to stop this genocide immediately. And it's also a heads up to both of the corporate war parties that the party is over and that the American people are coming back to take charge of our democracy.
Thank you. And then just another somewhat related question when it comes to lobbyists. Right now in the media, there is huge talk, especially with everything going on about AIPAC's influence on our politicians. But even beyond AIPAC, you'll see some of these big politicians and you'll see some of their largest donors are Blackstone, for example. And to me, that is completely anti-American and not putting the American citizens first, because they're focusing on these large private equity firms that are actually hurting the American economy because it makes it more difficult for families to actually purchase single-family homes when you have these private equity firms going out and buying. And you're seeing all these big-name politicians. These are who these guys are funded by. How would you address that as a president? Because you will be a president among many other politicians. So how do you address that so that way the politicians are actually putting the citizens first when these lobbyist groups are coming at them with millions of dollars?
Exactly. That's a really great question, and I would love to share with you our thinking about that. When you think back to Barack Obama's campaign, he broke a lot of barriers thanks to a really strong grassroots movement. We need that strong grassroots movement, but unlike Barack Obama, who basically put his ground troops on the shelf, told everybody to go home the minute he won the election. And his first announced decision was that he was bringing Larry Summers, the architect of the Wall Street meltdown, who implemented policies under Clinton that basically, dismantled protections that had been created after the Great Depression, basically setting up the 2008 crash. So that was, that's how Barack Obama was going to deal with the 2008 crash, was by bringing in the treasurer who had implemented those policies. It was very clear that Barack Obama was in service of Wall Street here, in spite of all the hopey-changey happy talk that he came with. So, we will, let's see, hang on, I'm just getting my battery on here. Okay, there it goes. We are not going to send our ground troops home. If we get elected, it will be because we have a strong grassroots movement. But everybody needs to be put on notice. If we accomplish what we set out to do, whether it's getting into the White House or simply establishing a strong political force, we have to keep going. This doesn't end for us on the day of the election. In fact, if we're in the White House, our work has only begun on the day of the election. And we will have the bully pulpit of the White House. So as president, you have the bully pulpit. So you have an opportunity to really speak to and persuade the American people. We will also, have the ability to hold elected officials' feet to the fire by reviving the old institution of town hall meetings. We don't have representatives meeting with their constituents anymore. Why is that? Because they're too busy raising money from their big donors, and their votes are with their big donors and not with their constituents. So we really need to, shame elected officials into, into compliance with their voting public again. Also, by bringing back meaningful congressional hearings, like, say, the Church Committee that really investigated the role of the CIA in overthrowing other governments. We can hold hearings that also help inform and empower everyday people so that we can then take those issues to our electeds and demand that they step up to the plate and do the right thing. And I would also mention that we have some wonderful candidates down ballot who are also challenging empire and oligarchy. They go together hand in hand, and we are, going to challenge them at every level of government. So, pay attention, to who's on your ballot, because there are a lot of anti-war, anti-genocide candidates who will also be challenging power. If there's a grassroots movement to propel us into the White House, that grassroots movement is also there on behalf of many Green candidates, for example, who are running for Senate and for Congress. So we will be there with allies, but our biggest ally is the American people, who we are going to continue to put front and center in this fight to reclaim the promise of our democracy.
Ria, did you
I
have
have
any questions?
Sorry.
Oh, no, Hope, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask if it sounds like you have an uphill battle ahead of you. But that being said, there are some initiatives people are pushing that would make third-party candidacies a lot more viable in the future, like ranked choice voting and the Interstate Voters Compact. What are your opinions on those things? How likely do you think they are? And if you were to advise young people who really want a third-party candidacy to become a reality in their lifetime, where would you tell them to put their energy? Would you say to do both of those things? Do we have a better chance with one or the other? What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts in general is that we have to fight on the issues. So it's both fighting for, democracy reforms like ranked choice voting, for example, or ballot access reforms. We have to reform those issues, but we also have to speak to the leading concerns that people are struggling with to keep a roof over their heads, to ban the purchase of our housing, as Wally was saying, the purchase of housing broadly now by these, financial equity firms that are buying up what used to be single-family housing or rental housing. We need to fight on the issues as well. My feeling, I didn't want to have anything to do with political parties because of what I witnessed, in my formative years with the war in Vietnam and just the absolute betrayal and treachery of political parties. And it's only gotten worse over the years. I didn't want to have anything to do with political parties, but I did get very interested in Ralph Nader's campaign. I was always an activist, so I was working on the issues. And what I witnessed was that issue by issue, they all get sidelined because in the issues, it's very hard to ever achieve critical mass. And that's where a political party comes in. A political party is an alliance of people on the issues that basically are very interconnected, So our right to health care, our right to affordable housing, our right to good jobs, our right to a $25 minimum wage, our right to free public higher education, our right to end predatory student debt, to just abolish it. So the minute we get together, we are unstoppable. So my answer to you is really to fight where your heart is, because that's where you're going to fight the hardest. But, it's like that motto of, from the days of navigation and sailing. It was like one hand for yourself and one hand for the ship. So we got to fight on what really is most meaningful to us, but we also have to fight together. And by definition, that's what a real political party is. And I don't consider Democrats or Republicans real political parties. They are basically corporate creations of big money with robots, essentially, representing them on the issues that they've been instructed to take certain positions on. So it's not a living creature. It's really a corporate creature that's represented by those parties. I think you have to be a people-powered campaign that is powered by volunteers and everyday people, with some staff, but, we're not talking large contributors. It's contributors which are the real problem and who pull the strings from the inside. So fundamentally, that is kind of where, to my mind, the priority is. It's not one issue, it's all these issues. They're all really important. Like, when you go to your doctor, you don't say, "Oh, please take care of my heart," and ignore my kidneys and my liver and my nervous system. It's like we need all of those things to live our lives. And it's true, we need all of these issues which are at crisis level right now. We need all of them. And the thing is for people to plug in where they are most impassioned, which is where they will be most effective, but for us to be working together really as an undividable whole, which includes, of course, our foreign policy and the takeover of our democracy, really by the likes of AIPAC and the war contractors, the war profiteers, who are really calling the shots on our foreign policy. And it is, as horrific as it is, I don't think any of us in our lives have ever witnessed anything like what we're seeing every day going on in Gaza right now. It's just staggering and incredible. But the flip side of that is that people are really standing up right now and have really crossed that red line. And things that we never thought were going to be possible in our lifetimes now could very well be possible. This is a complete unprecedented situation where we are facing crisis in every dimension of our lives like we have never seen before. And when you have this unprecedented crisis, you have an unprecedented potential for actual political transformation that could happen. And whether we get all the way there or we simply launch it, these problems are not going away. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. Never has and it never will. Power will hold on to power. Power will not give that up. And right now you have basically a handful of oligarchs and wealthy, powerful corporations who are calling the shots. And it will take a lot of work for us to dismantle that power structure of empire and oligarchy. But we've got to do it. We have no choice. Our lives really depend on that. And people are so waking up right now. It's incredibly uplifting and exciting. And with the courage of our younger generation doing what they're doing, putting everything on the line, we have that spark of that commitment, not to mention the Palestinian community and the Muslim community who've really been standing up with incredible courage, launching the uncommitted movement and the abandoned Biden movement. That has taken so much courage. And I think we build on that now and we move from uncommitted to committed, because if we're going to defeat the empire, we need a focus, we need a purpose. We can't just say, "Oh, we'll bow out." No, we have to take the lead here because power is, going to just keep doing what they're doing. They are normalizing the torture and murder of children on an industrial scale. So we have to stand up and fight this, because what goes in Gaza now is going to go all over the world. So we have an enormous moral imperative now like we have never seen before, to fight for justice for Palestine and justice for us all.
So it sounds like you're saying like community building, alliance building, like that we need to stand strong together more so than to focus on any individual policy objectives per se?
I'd say both.
Am I understanding that right? Both.
I think, in fact, it's both, because we do get a lot of mileage out of focusing on strategic issues that mean a lot in your community. It might be housing, it might be some polluting incinerator, whatever the issue is. It might be a war contractor. We get a lot of mileage out of standing up to fight on that issue, but at the same time, we are building a coalition. And in my view, we have to be political here. We're not going to get out of here alive unless we actually challenge power. So I really encourage people to step up to the plate and be at least politically affiliated, and to fight within a political context. And I myself have been helping to build the Green Party to have a people-powered party that could be working with other people-powered parties once we get to ranked choice voting. And it's not like one small political party should take over. No, we need multi-partisan democracy is where we need to go. But we do need to work together to ensure that we have the momentum we need to actually fight back.
Can I ask a question regarding foreign policy? Many Americans are becoming worried that America is losing its positioning on the global stage, especially among countries in the global South. In the United Nations, the United States is seemingly more ostracized, and it is affecting our diplomacy with countries across the world. What do you think is the cause of that, and then how would you correct that in a way to strengthen ties with those key countries, especially when as we see China and Russia beginning to feel more emboldened in their actions?
Yes, and it's no surprise to see Russia and China emboldened and getting together, because we've kind of been conducting war on all of them and have been very hostile and aggressive towards all of them. So we've kind of been driving them together, and we've had such a predatory position, towards the global South, by way of, seeking their resources and extracting wealth from them, both with corporations who go there for cheap labor and abuse the environment, or extracting oil, etc. This just very extractive and predatory position with the rest of the world. So it's no surprise to see the rest of the world, standing up. And you have China that has a very different approach. They're building this Belt and Road Initiative where they help build essential infrastructure without bankrupting the country, which is what we do. We impose, very disabling terms of IMF agreements, and we put them into debt, and they can never then get out of that debt. And it was just recently announced by the IMF, in fact, that many of these countries of the global South cannot meet their needs and repay their debt. So, we're kind of at the end of the line here in this abusive relationship that the U.S. has had, presuming that we are the sole global power. We are not the sole global power. We are part of a multipolar power structure around the world right now. We need to become a team player, and we need to step up to international law and human rights. It's for lack of supporting those frameworks that we're really kind of in the doghouse right now internationally. And if you look at U.S. votes, where it's us and Israel against the rest of the world, it's no surprise that the world has really lost respect for us, and we have lost our standing with the rest of the world's powers. So this is just another sign of the times that we need a foreign policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy, and a foreign policy that is not being dictated by the war profiteers. There's nothing they want more than more war. There's nothing they want more than resources that are being extracted from other countries and domination. So, it's time to grow up. It's time to stop being, the bully in the schoolyard and it's time to become, to step up to the plate and be a part of the global community. That is how we begin to repair our relationships with the rest of the world. Just the other day, the U.S., launched these very high tariffs, these prohibitive tariffs against China under the guise of, reindustrializing our economy. Well, it takes a lot more than that to reindustrialize our economy. This is basically a way of doing favors to the fossil fuel industry by shutting out electrical vehicles from China, which are affordable and which could help working people, green their budgets and their energy profile. So, and then the U.S. also put our troops in part of Taiwan recently, which violates our basic agreements with China. So we are poking the bear vis-a-vis Russia and vis-a-vis China over and over again. And, this is extremely dangerous, and we need to stop doing that and to start working collaboratively and cooperatively with the rest of the world. That is within our reach. That's doable. The problem is that we just have this power structure that is completely clueless. They don't know what diplomacy is about. They're just dominators. They are sort of human beings that sort of never developed past the bullying stage of being adolescents. So we need to remove them from positions of power and take back a responsible role on the world stage before it's too late.
While we're on this topic, real quick, I just want to sneak this in. What will you do to AIPAC? Just a very basic question.
I would do what John F. Kennedy. This is what John F. Kennedy said needed to be done, which was that AIPAC needs to be registered as a foreign agent. At the time, AIPAC didn't exist under its current name, but basically the predecessor. So yeah, AIPAC needs to be restricted as a foreign agent. And, and again, we also need public financing of our campaigns so that candidates are not systematically bribed into taking the positions of their biggest donors. So
would that look
again,
like France?
Fix this,
I'm just curious.
On many levels. What's that?
You said public financing of campaigns. I'm just very sorry to interrupt you. So like sure. France, is that what you're kind of getting at? Or what it would look like, kind of like France?
I'm not sure what the program is exactly in France, but I know that here in the U.S. we have systems of public funding. So Maine, for example, adopted what's called the clean election system, so that any candidate can qualify once they've demonstrated adequate public support. They then qualify for public funding. It's not a matching fund. Matching funds simply amplify disparities between campaigns. So if you've got big funders and then you have matching funds, you have even more money, putting small parties or grassroots campaigns at a disadvantage. So in my home state, we adopted clean elections. And then the progressive Democrats in our legislature repealed it on a voice vote. They undid public financing. Public financing basically means that we can have politicians who are accountable to the public instead of being accountable to their big special interest donors. So absolutely we can do this, and there are several models for it, but it's that clean election system which is currently functioning in Maine and I believe in Arizona, and we could have it all over the country as well as at the national level. This is where we need to go.
I was just referring to France publicly funding their elections. That's all, just the basic idea. So I'm really, I believe very strongly in publicly funded elections.
Great. Terrific. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
As you brought up how we have kind of AIPAC has taken over. I am a Jewish American who is constantly speaking for the Palestinian cause. And as a concern from the Jewish community, a great deal that Zionism and Judaism has become intertwined. And as a result of that, the very definition of the anti-Semitism has evolved over time. would you look to begin to reevaluate the definition of anti-Semitism as we began to approach this?
Oh, absolutely. I think we need to get clear about the distinction, as you are saying, between Zionism and Judaism. Zionism is not Judaism. Zionism has, for most of its history, been very controversial in the Jewish community, and it was widely opposed at its onset. And some of the super Orthodox rabbis now continue to consider Zionism anti-Jewish because it violates basic Jewish tenets. And if you ask them, well, which Jewish tenets are they? They say, well, two of the most critical 10 commandments: thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not steal. So they are extremely outspoken. These are Jews who have lived side by side for centuries with Muslims and with Christians, and who know that this is a myth, that this is a religious battle. This is not a religious battle. This is about dispossessing people of their land, driving them off the land, and killing them to the extent that it's necessary. The massacres began at the very outset of the State of Israel. In fact, before the State of Israel even began, there was, the terrorist attack, for example, on the King David Hotel in Jerusalem that murdered some 100 people, and many more massacres that occurred from the very start against Palestinian communities, and the destruction of their towns, the burning, driving people out, and then the Nakba in 1948. But there were massacres even before the Nakba, and a plan to essentially terrorize the indigenous population, which is what the Palestinians always said. And it was only in the 1990s when the historic documents in the archives of the State of Israel were opened up for inspection by historians. At that point, it was actually documented that, yes, in fact, this has been a plan for ethnic cleansing and displacement, and whatever violence needed to take place in order to acquire this land. And, there are, it's very important that people who were raised, and if you were raised Jewish, you were raised at least to be an implicit Zionist, even without knowing what Zionism was. We were all elated that this wonderful, idealistic community was being established in the desert and making the desert bloom, we were told, not knowing about the bloom that was already taking place for millennia, And so there was this whole mythology that Jews were taught, and, we thought a land without a people and a people without a land, it's a perfect fit. That's what we were taught. So it's really important that all of us, Jews in particular, and Zionists especially, go back to the drawing board to see what is the history of this movement for basically establishing a nationalist ethno-state, as if we should all find security in establishing, armed encampments. We need international law. We need human rights. We need everybody to be safe everywhere they are, without having to worry about every religion having its own ethno-state. Personally, I think separation of church and state is a very good idea, and you can just get into all kinds of abuses when that's not the case. So I think we need democracies that are driven by international law and human rights, and we just leave the whole ethno-state thing behind. So very much, your point is exactly right on. It's time for a reckoning with actually what the history of Zionism is and why we need to move beyond Zionism. Actually, to come into alliance, really, with basic Jewish values. As the super Orthodox rabbis say, basic Jewish values respect the separation of church and state. They, entirely condemn the violence that's been associated with this effort to grab the land of the Palestinians.
If I could just piggyback on that, I can't help notice the parallels between what's happening to the Palestinian people and what happened to the native people here in America, and a lot of my followers, and I see a lot of people in the comment section, are wondering what your stance is on land back and also immigration.
Yes. So on land back, let me just say we support land back. We think that, open spaces really thrive under indigenous management, as they always have. And these, the land back movement is essentially about returning large open spaces to their indigenous stewardship, which is how those lands flourish, and it's also how native peoples flourish. So that needs to be done. I also support reparations, by the way, both for formerly enslaved people and for indigenous people who've had so much land stolen from them. So those are active issues as well. And on the question of immigration, I think the most important thing we have to do about the immigration crisis is to stop causing it in the first place through our policies of endless war, overturning other sovereign governments, and there have been about 70 of them since the end of the Second World War that we have overturned, from Iran, and the democratically elected government of Iran. We installed the Shah so that we could continue to have access to Iran's oil, to Guatemala, and Indonesia and beyond. Just, one horrific disaster after another that we have conducted. So we need to stop overturning other people's countries and stop interfering with their own domestic affairs, especially on behalf of U.S. corporations, which is usually what this is about. Yes. So we have to stop destabilizing other governments. We also have to start stabilizing the climate. You're not stabilizing the climate if you're just creating electric vehicles. You have to get rid of the fossil fuels on an emergency basis. So we have to we need a Green New Deal and to support countries of the global south, because it is that climate displacement which is also driving huge amounts of migration. We also have to end the war on drugs in this country and south of the border, because it's the violence of empowering these cartels through making the system illegal by creating an illegal system of drug use. We create the violence of the cartels, and we empower that violence. So there are so many steps we can take to essentially dismantle this massive migration of people who are running for their lives from crises that we ourselves have basically created. So that's one thing. And some of that can have immediate impact. For example, by legalizing cannabis, it really pulls the rug out from under the violence of the drug cartels. But in addition, we need to treat immigrants with respect and dignity as the wealth that makes America great. It is our diversity, it's our cultural diversity, it's our diverse traditions that make America the unique and really creative melting pot culture that it is. And so people who have basically fled because we have destroyed their homeland or made it so violent that they can't stay there, they need to be treated with dignity and respect. And instead of building walls, we need to have a processing service for immigrants. We need to have civil society infrastructure in place, as well as legal infrastructure, so that people are screened. We're not bringing in people who are fleeing, a history of violence and illegality. People get screened immediately when they come here, and we have adequate civil society institutions to do that. And we provide supportive housing for people in the process of being screened. Once they're screened, they get papers and they can start work immediately, because it's that workforce that is needed all over the country. And then migrants who are a net plus in terms of their economic productivity, they are a net plus, and they will get to be a net plus much quicker if we are processing them in real time and then allowing them to go, where they want to go to meet the needs of the various job markets, because immigrants come here ready, willing, and able to be working. And then communities will be competing for the immigrant newcomers instead of, saying, oh, no, you can't come here. Right now, all the burden is being placed on our communities to have to deal with the processing of migrants and their transition. This is something that the federal government should be doing. That is our responsibility to ensure that our borders, are safe and that migrants are coming here in an organized and orchestrated fashion. And by eliminating the crises that are driving people over the border, then we allow people to stay in their communities, which is overwhelmingly where people want to stay. They don't want to leave their families, their relations, their neighbors. People only get into a boat if the boat is less dangerous than staying where they are. So we can stabilize this whole crisis. It has a lot to do with stabilizing the climate crisis as well. The United Nations predicts, right now we have somewhere around, 60 million, it's a large number of migrants who are on the move. But it's going to get much, much worse. And it's predicted that we will have 1 billion climate migrants alone by mid-century. So we have work to do. And again, these are among the very many reasons why we need to be standing up and standing together and seizing this perfect moment to actually move us forward the way we can in this perfect storm right now for political change.
Absolutely. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us tonight. If you could give us all, on closing, one piece of advice for how we move forward in this revolution that's occurring, what would that piece of advice be?
That advice is to have the courage of our convictions, because we know that we have the power. Again, in Alice Walker's words, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it. And I have to say, to one of the earlier questions about what I've learned in running many races, it's about how much power we have and how very much afraid of us the current structure of empire and oligarchy is. They know that they are on their last legs. They know that they have run their course as far as it can go. And we are really in end stage empire. We're in end stage capitalism. We are in end stage oligarchy. It is at a point of meltdown right now. So we have the power of our numbers. We have the power of our moral authority. We have the power of our vision, and essentially of our democracy. And the key, I think, to transformation here is to acting with the knowledge that we, in fact, do have the power, and for us to move together to enact that power, because together we truly are unstoppable. And it's been such an honor to speak with you all tonight. It's so great to know that you exist, that you're out there on TikTok. I totally love what you're doing. And I look forward to talking with you again at some point, and just, for us to move forward as the team that in fact we actually are. So thank you so much. This has been really wonderful.
We are so grateful you exist.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Honored. Thank you.
Yes.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Okay, take care, everybody. See you.
Bye.
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 Okay, guys, make sure you go and follow all of the creators on this panel here if you haven't already. And I know that Weeds Gaming is in here, and he's going to have a follow-up discussion about this live post. So any creators, do you guys have any words to add?
I can't believe she's real. She's
exactly.
so amazing. I know some of you in the comments were frustrated you had questions and we didn't get a chance to ask all your questions. Unfortunately, there's only so much time, and I'm hoping we'll have another opportunity to do something like this. Listen.
You came back in. You came back in. Okay, cool.
And I do want to address, I know that there were a couple comments about not having a person of color on our panel. We are working on it. We did ask a number of people, schedules didn't align, but please be aware, we are completely aware and we are working on adding individuals of all backgrounds to this panel. So please be with us as we continue to grow. You know, it was something that I did notice, and I am I'm sorry that we weren't able to gather that more adequately for this one. But in the future, we will absolutely do our best to have a representative from each and every community on the panel. Anybody else?
You said there was going to be a talk on somebody's, who's hosting that? Who was the creator?
Yeah, Weeds Gaming. He's in here right now. He has been a huge supporter of Jill. If you guys aren't following him, he actually brought me on when things started going downhill with Biden, and he's able to kind of also clear up some of the smear campaign that we've all heard about Jill over, you know, the course of the past 2 years. But he's got greater in-depth knowledge there. So Weeds Gaming for sure for a more in-depth discussion about this.
Weeds wants a formal apology from me because he tried to tell me how amazing Jill was months ago, and I was like slow to pick it up because sometimes I'm a little slow. So Weeds Gaming, I'll just give it to you. You were right, buddy. All right, so there you have it. I don't say that a lot, so cherish this moment.
I love that.
I told him, I said, we just needed a come to Jesus moment. You just needed to give us some time.
You know, I needed to figure it out for myself like everybody else will eventually, I think. I hope.
We've got Jasmine Sherman coming up. RFK is in the works. I've had some back and forth with his assistant, and I've also reached out to Cornell West. So keep in touch, and we hope to have more TikTok town halls for you in the future. And to my wonderful co-host, thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate
Love you guys.
We love you.
Bye. Good night, everybody.
Bye.